promoting climate justice and sustainability ever since I was little. As has already been said, I'm a volunteer at an organisation called Australian Youth Climate Coalition, or AYCC, and I help run the strikes in Taree as well. I'm also the school's environmental leader, which means I'm able to run programs and projects within my school to try and empower students to be a bit more sustainable. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how students can impact our school environment and hopefully provide everyone with some ideas on how you can implement similar strategies in your own school, especially when there is only a small amount of support from teachers and parents. So for a bit of context, I go to a school in a small rural town called Taree on the eastern coast of Australia. While it is an extremely beautiful area, the people who live here can also generally be fairly conservative, which is an issue for me and makes it really difficult, especially as someone who is interested in social justice issues, to kind of share ideas and raise a bit of awareness about issues, for example, like sustainability. Particularly in school, it's not always possible to bring attention to these problems without being knocked back and kind of criticized for it, which can be difficult. So while it can be disheartening to constantly receive criticism and be rejected by teachers and students, there are some ways that we can work around it and try and create an impact for students who do have an interest in sustainability, and hopefully help create some interest for students who don't already have that interest. So the first step for kind of creating a bigger environmental impact in your school community is to first start up a group or a club. I'm not sure if John Dewey already has a club, but I think it's a really valuable addition to any school community, as it allows students to easily get involved. I understand that this will probably be really difficult for countries that are still heavily affected by COVID at the moment, but I would suggest perhaps doing some weekly or fortnightly Zoom calls to try and build up a group. And then once you're able to go back to school and meet in person, you can really start trying to organize some projects and things like that. So another thing I'd suggest while building your group is to not name it the environmental group. Unfortunately, I became the leader when the group had already been formed. So I'm not actually able to change the name of the environmental group at my school. But I'd suggest that you name it probably something different. The reason I say this is just because there can often be a certain stigma around environmentalism, which is kind of a shame. I know in Australia, there's a bit of a term that people use to call people who are interested in the environment, and that's greenies. That's not always a good term. But to kind of prevent that stigma and actually make sure that people are joining your group, it's best to call it something like the action group rather than an environmental group. This might also generate a bit more interest for students and hopefully increase the number of people who attend. Then obviously it's super important to start recruiting students. Some students are really nervous to join because they're shy or they've never been involved in something like this before and they don't want to be judged by their friends. So you want to make it as easy as possible for people to become involved in the group. It's really important to create a super welcoming atmosphere and to not have any pressure for students to go to every single meeting or become really proactive in the group. And it's really, really good to just keep it kind of chill and low key so that people can come and go whenever they want and they don't feel any pressure to constantly be doing stuff for the environmental group. It's also really, really important to advertise for the group. Posters around the school are always super effective, as well as things like email blasts or announcements. It can really help generate some interest in your group and hopefully bring students in. So building a group is part of creating a support network in your school, which is really, really, really important, especially if you don't have a lot of support. It's also super important if you do go to a school that doesn't have a lot of support for sustainable projects, to know which teachers do support what you're doing and don't be afraid to ask them for help. Your teachers are there to help you, and especially if they're really interested in sustainable things, they're going to want to help you with those projects. Ideally, you should have one of these teachers to kind of supervise your group and be able to ask for permission for projects and things like that. I always find that's really, really helpful. We have a lovely teacher who helps me with the environmental group at school, and she always is there when I need to ask for permission or paperwork and things like that. So that's really great. And I'd highly recommend doing that as well. One of the things that should be the focus of your group is education. So most of the events and projects we try to run have education about sustainability at their core. One of the simplest actions we have is sending out a fortnightly email to all students and teachers. So generally it includes articles and sources of things that have happened in the week. For example, the National Economic Budget, which just got released in Australia, which basically outlines what the government is planning on spending money on in the next year, has just been released. So where in the next email, we're going to include articles kind of explaining the budget and like what's wrong with the budget, what's good about the budget, and then kind of how that affects sustainability and the environment. We also include links to events that students can participate in and organizations they can donate to, and obviously other extra things that they can become involved in. So we usually include a link of organizations that they can volunteer for if they're really, really interested in sustainability. We also try to include video links or other resources to make learning about these things a bit more enjoyable, because I know it can be a bit tedious reading through bunches of articles. Another event that we ran, which was really, really successful, was our Wall of Hope. So this was part of a campaign being run by the AYCC, but we adapted it to make it a little bit more creative for students. So at the moment, the Australian government is funding a lot of natural gas projects, which is a fossil fuel and obviously very, very bad for the environment. So basically what we did was choose a wall that was very visible in the school, and we had students write in chalk what they wanted the government to spend money on instead of gas. If you go to the next slide, please. Yep, so this is a really good picture of it all completed, all the students having written what they wanted the government to spend money on. So we had things like education, mental health, like health services, things like that. And it's really good because it gets students involved and gets them to actively learn about the issue while also kind of discussing solutions to the issue and alternatives for gas in our future. It's also a really simple idea. So that's another thing that's really important, is to keep your ideas really simple, because that means you usually don't have a lot of opposition for it, which is great in our case. And it's super easy to organize, and it looks really pretty too. So I know I always feel so happy when I walk past it at school, and it's in a really visible area so a lot of people can see it. So other projects that we've been running or have already run are changing all the computer backgrounds with a reminder to switch them off when not being used. So if you can see kind of in the bottom right-hand corner there, that's what it looks like, and it shows up on the screen and on the big computer screens, just to remind students to turn them off when they're not using them to save power. We also have been holding, you can see a picture of this in the bottom left-hand corner, a cleanup of the schoolyard competition. So different year groups have to go around the schoolyard and pick up as much rubbish as they can in a limited amount of time. So it's usually about 15 to 20 minutes. And then they bring it all back and we measure it up, and the winning year group actually received extra lunchtime. So that was a really good incentive for students, and that was part of our Clean Up Australia Day campaign. So yeah, it was really good, and it got lots of students involved, and it also meant that they had an incentive to actually do it rather than kind of, ignoring whatever we were saying. So that was really good. We also have documentary screenings at lunchtime, which are really, really good for students that don't necessarily like getting out and about. They prefer to just sit quietly. So students can bring their lunch, and we have snacks generally as well. So they can just come in, watch the documentary, hopefully learn a little bit more about sustainability and what they can do for sustainability. And that's another really good way for kids to get involved without having to proactively go out and do things. Other things are banner painting sessions for strikes and rallies that are being held in and out of school. So before the school strike that happened yesterday, we had a couple of banner painting sessions that students could come in and join, which was really good. Especially for those students that like art. It's super interactive again, and it's really fun to just kind of paint banners with everyone. So that's always a good alternative. We also have speakers from organizations talking about what students can do to get involved in sustainability, which is good again for spreading information and kind of highlighting what organizations are out there specifically for young people. In the middle there, you see a little picture of some of our students and a teacher at an excursion that we went to recently. So we also run excursions and out of school events with other organizations, which is really good for those students who are super duper keen. So that picture was taken at the Manning River Turtle Project, which we went to recently. And that was basically this organization called Take 3, talking about the impact of plastic pollution, especially on our local environment, with the endangered turtle called the Manning River turtle. So we were talking about that, and we went and did a little bit of a rubbish cleanup around as well, which is what you can see them doing there. So that was really good. Yeah, and then the last one is Mufti Days, where students can come out of uniform. So obviously this doesn't apply to countries where students or schools where students don't have to wear a uniform, but it's always a really good incentive because students love coming out of uniform, and all they have to do is bring a gold coin donation, and then we would usually use all that money to either bring in a speaker or donate it to a sustainability organization. So again, getting students involved, but they don't really have to do anything if they're not super keen. But again, raising money and creating awareness is really the main thing that we should be highlighting. So these are some just like really, really simple ideas for projects that can be run in schools with little resistance. I'm not sure if your school has run any of them before, but it's always really empowering as a student to kind of, see all your hard work go into something and then it like turn out to be a really big success. So yeah, they're just really simple ones, but I hope you'll be able to implement them in your school. So while it is important to keep having these like simple projects and events that are being run constantly throughout the year, it's also important to run projects that create like a little bit more impact. So recently, kind of in line with the school strikes and rallies being held across Australia, we've been holding in-school rallies. So while the school strike is amazing for creating awareness and educating young people and adults about the issues of climate change, there's a lot of resistance, obviously, from politicians and also schools, since they don't want students to miss out on school. And a lot of parents don't necessarily want their kids to go. So to kind of, incorporate those students that aren't able to leave school during the day, we've been holding in-school rallies. So this is so that students don't have to worry about missing out on classes or getting permission from parents. They're held at lunchtime, and again are about creating awareness about the issues that are being faced in our country and around the world, particularly in regards to climate change. And these are, again, a really good way for students to get involved. I know a lot of students just love walking around chanting stuff with a sign for some reason. I'm not sure, but this is always super fun event and we get a lot of interest from students. So it's really, really helpful. I understand that they can be a little bit difficult to do, especially in areas that don't encourage protests, and especially with all the COVID restrictions that are happening in place right now. But it is a really excellent way for students to get excited and involved about sustainability. And I think generally it creates a really big impact on the school, both environmentally and like ethically. So it's really good. Part of this is also encouraging students to attend school strikes outside of school. So such as the one that was held yesterday, it's really important not only to provide for students that can't attend the strikes, but for those that can, we really want to encourage them to be out there taking charge of their future and really determining what should be done for the climate crisis. It's also really great when we can get them involved in events outside of school, like the strike or like other events that are happening. And we hope that by educating students in school, it will empower them to take action outside of school. And that's kind of ultimately the goal that you want to have by running your environmental or action group. So yeah, finally, I just want to highlight the importance of international collaboration. I think it's really, really great when we can incorporate global learning into our schools, either through the curriculum or through events and things like that. It's incredibly important to ensure that students are aware of issues not only in Australia, but around the world. And one way that we can kind of bring these issues to light is by collaborating with students such as yourselves from all around the world so that they can share ideas about their own issues in their own countries. So yeah, I'd really like to create an environment in our school where students can share ideas and collaborate with other students from around the globe. And I'd like to encourage you all to kind of do the same. So if you all wanted to like include your emails or like your social media handles in the chat, and hopefully that means that some students from around the country and around the globe will be able to collaborate in the future, get in contact with each other, and hopefully create a more inclusive learning space, not only sustainably in their schools, but again, outside of school and into the future. So yeah, I hope that you'll all be able to use these platforms to connect with other students and teachers from around the globe and hopefully collaborate on projects within the schools. So yeah, if you feel comfortable, you're more than welcome to do that. Put your email or your social media in the chat, and yeah, if anyone wants to collaborate on a project with me, then they're more than welcome. So that's kind of the end of my presentation. I hope you are able to gain some ideas on projects you can run in your own school and feel a bit inspired to try some of the things I spoke about. Before, I think that's about the end.